Hello, everyone. I'm truly grateful for discovering this website. I have taken some time to read stories from others, but this marks my very first post here. My story might stand out a bit from the others you have come across. I have been married for 40 years. I am 64 years old, and my spouse is 62. We share an exceptional bond. We are financially secure, in good health, and we have two grown daughters and three wonderful grandchildren. We're not just partners in life. We're also the closest of friends and true soulmates. Our intimate life together would make younger couples envious. So you may be wondering, what's the issue here? I remember that Saturday so clearly. The sun was shining brightly, and I was really excited about a great game of golf with my friends. I had been eagerly waiting for this day all week. It was a chance to break free from the usual daily routine and have some good times on the golf course. As I left my house, carrying my golf clubs and wearing a big smile, I had no idea that something unexpected was about to happen. I have been looking forward to this day so much, but after almost reaching the golf course, I suddenly realized I had forgotten a crucial tool for golf, my trusty Divalt repair tool. I had promised my friends that I would bring it, and I had completely forgotten it in my rush to leave the house. I was annoyed with myself for the oversight, so I quickly made a U-turn and headed back home. I hoped that this wouldn't cause too much of a delay for our tea time. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a car that I recognized parked in front of our house. It belonged to Victor, a friend of my oldest grandson. He's usually around to assist us with various tasks like cleaning the pool, helping with heavy lifting, and landscaping. Victor is only 19, and we first met him 3 years ago when my grandson came to visit us. Since then, my wife and I have occasionally asked for his help with the chores I mentioned. However, he wasn't supposed to be here today, since he had already been here yesterday. I wondered if my wife had asked him to assist her with something I didn't know about. Had she invited him over without informing me? Feeling a bit curious, I cautiously entered the house, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. To my surprise, I found my wife in the living room, dressed in her bra and panties. Victor had just emerged from the guest bathroom without his shirt on as I walked into the room. Both of them looked startled to see me. Apart from the fact that my wife was half clothed and Victor had just exited the guest bathroom without his shirt on, there wasn't any direct evidence of them being in a compromising situation. However, their reaction and the heavy lingering scent of intimacy in the air made it clear to me that I had just arrived moments away from catching them in a compromising position. My wife asked me why I was home early, but I ignored her and addressed Victor directly. I asked him what he was doing in my house, and it was the first time I had ever spoken to him like that, because I had always considered him a good kid. He struggled to find the right word, and my wife raised her voice to support him, explaining that she had called him over to clean the pool. Clean the pool? I retorted. But the pool was cleaned yesterday, I pointed out. She was trying to regain control of the situation, but her attempt was falling flat. She realized that what she had just said sounded foolish, and she tried to salvage it by claiming that the pool hadn't been cleaned properly the last time. Victor, on the other hand, appeared stunned, as if he had seen a ghost. I pointed at Victor and sternly told him that I knew what he had been up to, even though my suspicions were based on limited evidence. I warned him that if I ever caught him in my house again, I wouldn't hesitate to take drastic measures. In his rush to leave, he forgot to put his shirt back on and hurried out to his car. While he was making his getaway, my wife was telling me to stop with the accusation, insisting that I was being irrational and going through some sort of mental breakdown. It's worth noting that my wife and I had a strong marriage, as I mentioned earlier. I trusted her completely, and I had never had any reason to doubt her before this incident. On that particular day, I could sense it in the atmosphere, the awkwardness in their body language. I had a strong hunch that I had caught her in something, and she acted offended that I would even suspect her stooping so low. She threatened to inform our children and grandson about the absurd accusations I was making, trying to turn the table on me. I questioned her about why she was wearing only bra and panties, knowing that she usually dressed so when she's sunbathing. Moreover, this wasn't the type of bra and panties she sunbathed with, as it's a see-through. Her response was that she planned to sunbathe and swim, which struck me as highly unlikely since the weather was quite chilly. Throughout the years I had known my wife, this wasn't the kind of weather she would normally swim in. I could tell she was not being truthful. I trusted my gut feeling, and I stood firm in my beliefs. Even though she was trying to make me doubt myself with her gaslighting tactic, it made me wonder how long this affair had been going on. After all, he's only 19, and we have known him for 3 years. It made me question if she had been gaslighting me for much longer than I realized. Our argument escalated into a massive one, something we rarely experience. She adamantly denied any wrongdoing. Right at that moment, my friends called, wondering why I was late. I contemplated counseling, but I decided to go, hoping it would help me cool off and clear my head. While we were playing golf, my mind kept going back to moments in our past that made me wonder if she had been cheating and gaslighting me all along. I started to realize that perhaps I had been blind throughout our marriage. If I hadn't caught them in that compromising position, I might have continued to believe her excuses. Then it struck me that I had harbored these suspicions for quite some time. However, due to the deep love we had shared and my naivete, I had never dived deeper into those doubts. One particular memory had always lurked in the background, no matter how much time had passed, and I decided to revisit it. I wouldn't label these memories as repressed, because they had always been there, but I started to re-examine them through the eyes of a much older and wiser man than the young and naive 20-year-old I was back then. Before we got married, we lived together during our college years for a period of 2 years. It marked my first real experience in an actual relationship, as I had been a late bloomer in that aspect. In my perception, our relationship was exclusive and monogamous. However, upon reflection on it now, there were some rather obvious signs that I had failed to pick up at the moment. The more I thought about this, the more I started connecting different parts of the puzzle. Recent events triggered these memories that includes what I now believe were at least 3 different guys she slept with during that time. One of them was my former best friend. We drifted apart. We haven't seen each other for over 20 years, as he now resides in another country. These thoughts have been bothering me a lot, and I can't shake them off. They have been piling up inside me, becoming too much to handle. They disturb my sleepless nights and make me feel very anxious during the day. Just as she said she would, my wife found my accusation of her sleeping with our grandson's friend ridiculous and offensive. She even involved our kids, but she only told them part of the story, leaving out the fact that I saw her in a revealing bikini and our grandson's friend without a shirt. And she told them he was just cleaning the pool while she was in our garden. Maybe she had lied before without me noticing, but this time it was crystal clear. She was trying to make it seem like I was acting erratic in my old age. The worst part is, I couldn't explain to my kids and grandson that it was just a gut feeling and that I had a sense something was off. They didn't believe that she was alone in the living room wearing a revealing bikini while he had only a boxer shorts with no shirt. It became a battle of her words against mine, and her handling of the situation made it look like she was in the right. The weeks that followed were really tough. I lost a significant amount of weight, and I was already quite thin to begin with. I felt like I was driving myself crazy, and I was worried that I might harm myself physically. She managed to turn all my kids against me, and I was being seen as the villain. I am not naturally forceful, and I'm terrible at arguing. I'm the type of person who would rather walk away from a confrontation and deal with it quietly, while she was the opposite. It got to a point where I started doubting myself. I secretly began individual counseling a while ago because I felt like my whole marriage was a sham. The therapist has been trying to teach me mindfulness, but I guess I'm not very good at it yet. After weeks of avoiding any conversation about her affair, I reached a breaking point and finally spoke up about the affair she had in our 20s. To say she was shocked is an understatement. Initially, she denied everything and called me crazy, like she had been doing for the past few weeks. But when I started presenting my evidence, she became defensive and accused me of sleeping with Lisa, which simply didn't happen. She said, "I know you did it because you told me." Of course, I hadn't told her because A, it never happened, and B, I don't think I would have told her even if it had. When I continued to deny it, she shifted her accusation to, "Well, it was Kathy then, wasn't it?" Again, That also didn't happen. At that point, I couldn't hold it together any longer. I had a breakdown unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I curled up on the floor, overcome by uncontrollable sobs. Breathing was difficult, let alone speaking, and it felt like an eternity. This time, I believe she was genuinely surprised by my reaction. She knelt down, hugged me, and held me as I eventually regained some semblance of sanity. She denied everything and reassured me that she was committed to working through our issues. She mentioned that she didn't understand what was going on with me, and she was afraid that I might decide to leave her for delusional reasons. However, up to this point, all the evidence I had was indirect, and she hadn't admitted to anything. We slowly began to talk about what had been happening. One thing that puzzled me was the difference in our memories, even about basic things like timelines and events. Maybe that's just something that happens after being together for over 40 years. Although I still feel like my memories are as clear as if they happened last week. At this point, she was mostly listening and hadn't said much. I had a feeling that she was shocked that I had all these memories and wasn't as naive as she might have thought. There was a part of me that suspected she wanted to figure out just how much I knew so she could decide how much she needed to confess to. She did mention that she would be willing to see my counselor if I thought it would help. The closest she came to admitting anything was when she mentioned she had done some terrible things. She also expressed fear that if she told me everything, it might change the way I feel about her. It reminded me of a line from Jack Nicholson in the movie A Few Good Men. You want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I couldn't help but wonder how the truth could be any worse than what my imagination was running wild with, or the pain I was currently experiencing. I also wondered how she managed to involve my kids in all of this. I had a strong belief that she was deeply ashamed of something. After 40 years together, I knew her well, so I decided to start recording our conversation. I was determined to prove to our kids that I wasn't crazy and that she was the one who had been unfaithful. One morning, I woke up with an idea to call my former best friend, the one I suspected was having an affair with my wife. I hadn't seen him for over 20 years. He had moved out of the country. My plan was to call him and secretly record the conversation, hoping he would admit to having an affair with my wife. I never imagined I would find myself making that call. I got his number from a mutual friend. With my heart pounding and my hands trembling, I dialed the number, knowing it connected me to someone on the other side of the world and the unfortunate reasons I was calling him for. Hello, a familiar voice answered, somewhat groggy, as it was in the middle of the night in his time zone. John, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. It's been a long time, hasn't it? There was a moment of silence, and I could almost hear his thoughts racing through the memories of our past friendship. Who is this? He finally replied, his voice cautious. It's David, I said, taking a deep breath. David from back in the day. David? He exclaimed, disbelief in his voice. Is that really you? Yeah, I replied, it's me. We exchanged pleasantries, trying to catch up on 2 decades of our lives in a few minutes. It was painful, as the reason for my call weighed heavily on my mind. Finally, I mustered up the courage to ask, John, do you remember Anne? There was a pause, and I could feel his unease, even through the phone. Of course, he replied hesitantly. Anne is your wife? Yes, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. She was my wife. I paused, letting the gravity of my next words hang in the air. Anne just passed away last night. Silence enveloped us for what felt like an eternity. I knew he must have been shocked, his mind racing to process the news. I took a deep breath, trying to fake emotions. Before she died, she told me everything, John. What? What do you mean? He stammered. She confessed everything about your affair, I said, my voice trembling with anger and sadness. She told me about the betrayal, about the lies, about the years we lost because of it. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a heavy sigh. David, I interrupted him. Why, John? Why did you betray me like that? You were my best friend. He began to sob on the other end, his voice breaking. David, I can't even begin to explain how sorrow I am. It was a terrible mistake, and I have regretted it every day since. I could feel his remorse, but my heart was still heavy with anger and pain. I was recording the conversation as he confessed, as I wanted to hear him admit it, as he was the only way to get my wife to admit the truth and gain the respect back from my children. He sobbed uncontrollably. His guilt laid to bear for the first time in over 2 decades. David, please forgive me. I was weak, and I let you down in the worst way possible. I let the confession linger in the air for a moment before speaking again. Our friendship, our trust, it's all gone. Goodbye. After those final words, I ended the call, my heart heavy with a mix of emotions. I had the proof I needed, but the pain of the betrayal still weighed on me. When my wife returned, I played her the recording, and I watched as her face turned red with embarrassment. She knew she had been caught in a terrible lie. She begged me not to tell our kids, and we made a deal for her to confess to the other 2 affairs I had suspected her of. I recorded everything. After she confessed to the affair, she made me promise her that I wouldn't share the recording, but I suggested that we separate for a while to give both of us time to think about our marriage. We have been married for over 40 years, and I was 64 years old, while she was 62. We have had a strong relationship until I caught her with my grandson's friend, and have been having memory recalls of events that made me suspect that she hadn't been faithful and might have been cheating on me throughout our time together. She refused to admit to having an affair with our grandson's friend. She wanted to use the excuse that I was the reason for our separation so that she could maintain her innocence, and I agreed to this when we talked. She left our conversation feeling devastated about our impending separation. She said she would grant me an amicable divorce if I took the blame for ending the marriage, citing my suspicions and not her affair as the reason. Little did she know I had recorded all her admissions. The next day, my kids called me, urging me to reconcile with their mom. It wasn't until I played the recording for them and showed them all the evidence that they turned against her. My wife was furious that I hadn't kept our agreement and had decided to fight me through the process, aiming to take everything we had if I divorced her. Sadly, she doesn't understand that at my age, my material possession don't mean much to me, as long as I have enough to support myself until I'm 90, which is when most people in my family tend to pass away. What truly matters to me is the love of my children and the legacy I leave behind. Many people wanted me to stay with her just because we have been together for over 40 years. However, they forgot that as you grow older, you yearn to spend the rest of your life with someone who genuinely loves you. Every time I look at her, I see deceit, gaslighting, affair, and unfaithfulness. I believe I had had enough of living a life filled with lies. Thank you for making it to the end of this story. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel, and let's get some reaction in the comment section. Thank you, and